It's October 2015 and I've got the most expensive rackets in racquetball right here. So if you're watching this video, you probably already know that E-Force makes some of the most expensive racquetball rackets there are, and this year's model is no exception. The Apocalypse Beta comes in 4 different weights: 160 grams, 170 grams, 175 grams, and 190 grams. And just like the few previous model years, the 160 and 175 both come in a quadra-shaped form, like this one here, whereas the 170 and 190 gram models come in more of a teardrop shape, like this one right here. Most of the people buying these rackets are probably buying them based on weight, and I caution you greatly before doing that, because something you should know is, even though this racket says 160 grams right here on the frame, with string and grommets and power tubes, or whatever these things are called, this racket actually weighs 211 grams according to my scale. That's right, 51 grams heavier than the weight printed on the actual frame. For reference, here is the new Gearbox 170Q, and it's again advertised as 170, but when I place it on the scale, I can see that it actually weighs in at about 189 grams. Here is the Command PowerFlex 175. Advertised as 175, weighs in at about 202 grams. So keep that in mind, guys, when you're buying a racket, that the advertised weight is not always accurate. In fact, pretty much every racket is going to be 20 to about 50 grams heavier than what is shown on the actual frames. So one brand's 160 gram racket, maybe another brand's 190 gram racket. So you really can't compare weights based on the advertised number. You really have to know what the actual strung weight of the racket is. So I had a chance to hit all 3 of these rackets, the 160, the 170, and the 175. And just for reference, I'm comparing it to the Heat Seeker 175. This is the 2011 model, I believe. So this is 4 or 5 generations ago. And this one weighs in at about 213 grams fully strung. This one has a 146 swing weight and an even balance point. Now in reference to the new rackets, you've got the 160 gram, which weighs in, according to my postage scale, at 211 grams strung, and it has a advertised 2 gram head heavy balance and a 145 gram swing weight. Then you have the 170 Teardrop model, which weighs in at about 212 grams fully strung, according to my postage scale, and has an advertised swing weight of 146 or 145 balanced. And then finally you've got the 175 frame, which according to my scale actually weighs in at 213 grams, and it's got an advertised 1-point head heavy balance with a swing weight of 149. So the heaviest swing weight of the 3 that I've tested. Something to keep in mind there is you might have noticed that all 3 rackets, according to my scale, only weigh 2 grams difference. That's right, the difference between the 160 and the 175 is 2 grams, 211 grams versus 213 grams fully strung up. So if you're thinking about spending the extra 40 bucks to go from the 175 to the 160 more expensive model, keep in mind that it's not that much of an overall total weight difference. So here's an informal look at the balance point of the 3 rackets. Keep in mind that if a racket is balanced, as I push this racket off the edge of the table, it should start to go over at 11 inches. For every 1/8 of an inch above 11 inches, that would be 1 point head heavy. So first the 160, and if I hold the wrist lacer up a little bit, it starts to go over at 11 1/16, so that's about 1/2 a point head heavy. The 170 starts to go over at almost exactly 11. So the 170 is evenly balanced. And then finally the 175, I would say it starts to go over right about 11 3/16. So that puts it at about 1.5 points head heavy. With all that said, I have hit all 3 of these rackets, and I found that the 160 and the 175 surprisingly do play quite a bit differently, at least in my perception. The 160 did feel like the lighter racket, especially on those lob serves. You can really feel the effect of the ball against the weight of the frame. And believe it or not, even though it's only 2 grams lighter, the way that the 160 is balanced or whatever really makes it play like a little bit lighter racket. So if you have that faster swing speed, you're going to go with the 160, whereas most players with a medium or slower swing speed are probably going to actually prefer the 175. Now the 170 Teardrop is, again, a teardrop shape, which is a little bit different than I'm used to because, again, I've been playing with the quadriform shape for the last 2-3 years. And for those of you who like the teardrop shape, it's a no-brainer to go with the 170. In my brief play time with this racket, I felt like it was pretty good. It felt a little bit heavier, probably a little bit closer to the 170 in weight, even though it's really only 1 gram difference between the 160 on one side and the 175 on the other side. So the teardrop shape, which makes it play more like a teardrop racket, so it's got, you know, a little bit more power toward the top of the frame here, and it's a little bit less, I find it a little bit less forgiving, especially when you're hitting it below the sweet spot here. I like what I think is the added stability of the quadriform shape here. You sacrifice a little bit of power for a little bit more overall larger sweet spot on the quadriform. So my overall impression of the 2015-2016 E-Force rackets, they play great. They play just like an E-Force. Moving from the small power boosters on my old heat seeker to these huge power boosters on the new Apocalypse Beta really changed the vibration dampening characteristics. Honestly, the biggest difference between the 2 different generations of rackets is that these ones are way more heavily dampened. So without any vibration dampener, I really noticed there's very little vibration here. But with that said, similar to other E-Force models with the big power boosters here, that does come at the cost of a little bit of a different feel on ball contact. There's a little bit of a noise that you get with all this extra plastic right here. When you're actually hitting the ball, I've likened it to a wire whisk in the past. I think the vibration is greatly dampened, but you do have to keep in mind that you do still have this weird sort of noise, which adds like a psychological effect to each of your swings and your hits. So keep that in mind. But if you like the dampened feel, these power boosters are going to be perfect for you because this racket hits damper than any other E-Force I've personally hit with. The extended tubes, I don't really notice a difference there. If anything, those are just going to be more prone to breaking during stringing, I would think. But couldn't hurt, I guess, having those down there other than the fact that it just adds extra weight to the frame. So yes, my very favorite thing about these frames is the color scheme. I love the layout, the graphic design of these new frames, which is one of the reasons I'm pretty much surely going to upgrade to one after my demo is over. These are my favorite colors all on one racket. So really looking forward to the new color scheme. If you're sponsored, you're obviously going to be upgrading to this, but if you have any of the E-Forces from the last 4 or 5 years, including this Command PowerFlex forward, so that would be Command PowerFlex, Heat Seeker, Heat Seeker 2, Invasion, Invasion X, Apocalypse, Heat Seeker 3. If you have any of those E-Force rackets, functionally, there's very little reason to upgrade to the new Apocalypse Beta. But if you like the new cosmetic or if you like the new balance and swing weights, this might be worth your time to look at. Again, I'm updating just for the new cosmetic. But again, another great racket from E-Force. Super expensive. But if you have any of the E-Force rackets that already have power boosters, you're probably going to be okay sticking with those for at least the next season or 2. So hopefully, guys, this was helpful. Leave any questions or comments below, and I will respond to those. And I'll see you guys in the next one.